Hello, Dave and Tim here at the Single Malt Review, and new whiskey is always exciting, and new Indian whiskey has been particularly exciting in the last few years especially. What have we got today, Tim?
It sure has. It was great to have a new one to kick off the new year with, although that's I'm saying new year pretty facetiously at this point. But never mind, I'm going to claim it. We haven't been doing a lot over January. It's been pretty sleepy over here, but no longer. We're cracking straight into things now with this lovely one that has been very generously shared with us by the people over at Indri. Indri Indian Single Malt Whiskey, which is just about the third Indian whiskey that we have encountered after Amrit and Paul John.
Yeah.
And this one, there's a lot of very good buzz about this one, so it'll be very, very exciting to try it. So Dave sort of looked up the facts on this one.
Yeah.
I'll show you the bottle there.
So Piccadilly distillers have been brewing and distilling in India for a few decades now, but made quite a recent pivot into aiming to produce highest quality single malt whiskey and similar. It adheres to the Scottish and EU standards for production, quality control, and so on. They're based in Gurugram, outside New Delhi, up in Haryana state, so well to the north, which led me to think, hey, maybe this is going to be like a cooler climate whiskey, something closer to Scotland. Then I looked up weather stats. No, Haryana is like 40 degrees in the summer and just below freezing in winter. So it is positively tropical by the standards of New Zealand or Scotland. So it's still going to be some of that, I think, traditionally Indian warm weather whiskey. Is matured very fast, it's very vibrant. In fact, this whiskey was launched in 2021, so maybe 3 years after they shifted to this kind of production.
So yeah, it's in the typical model, young stuff that's been turbo aged in that the climactic time machine there of those very, very warm temperatures.
Yeah.
And otherwise, it's been made in a fairly traditional way, using Indian 6-row barley, which is hundreds of years old now. A far cry from the frequently iterated, frequently sort of re-released, zhuzhed up Scottish and English varieties. Goodness knows which one they're onto now. It was Golden Promise 100 years ago, and it is surely not today, because every 50 years or so a new barley comes out and everybody uses it, but not so here. We've got a very, very traditional one. And the casks they use.
This is the interesting part. So it's locally grown barley, similar to the kind favoured by Amrut, who are in the centre of the country, and Paul John down in Goa. But the casks are all imported. We have here French wine casks, and then some Pedro Jimenez sherry casks, and finally it was bourbon, right?
It was. The cask with which whiskey could not exist in this modern day and age.
Yeah.
And this one is good because this is presently their only release. It's the only one they make from the Indri single malt range.
They do produce a blended whiskey and also a rum.
Piccadilly rather than Indri, they are a much larger concern and have a much bigger and more diverse output. But this will be useful, and this is currently the beginning and the end of everything that Indri produces. So we will get a pretty complete snapshot of what they are up to. And taxonomically, this is uncoloured and unchill filtered, and at 46% ABV. And that is, I've already shown you once, I'll show you again. Goodness, that's a rich colour.
Yeah, that's for I'd guess, sub 3-year-old whiskey, or barely 3 at most.
Pretty good stuff. Yeah. And there's even, not that we've got a cold day here at all, there's a little bit of a fog to that one. That's not completely clear. So wearing its unchill filtered nature right out on its sleeve. So enough about the details. What have we actually got in the glass?
I haven't done really raring to go on this one. Oh, that is
It is different.
Coriander and licorice on the nose. Oh, cardamom.
There's spice. There is a lot of citrus. There's orange citrus, bitter orange citrus, particularly.
And a thin thread of lemon that you get in bourbon.
Yeah, and mineral. Huge amount of mineral. There's a flinty quality. There's a smoky quality to it. But it's a fairly mineral smoke. There's a coal smoke, and I really, really like it.
Plums and currants, which I think would be the red wine casks.
Yep, stewed stone fruit coming through there.
Wow.
What struck me, first and foremost, is how different this is in its character to Amrit and Paul John. They are, and they formerly were our only contact with Indian whiskey, so they sort of typify the style. They're pretty similar. Obviously, they're not identical, but they have this real tropical fruit note going on. And that might be from the more southern, more tropical climate.
Yeah.
This one is very, very different. This is slightly closer to the norms of Scotch whisky, I think, while still being quite distinctly something else. If someone gave this to me blind, I would have definitely been weirded out. I'd say this is from somewhere weird. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have picked it as Indian whiskey because it is so far from the typical model that they're used to.
If someone had given this to me and forced me to guess in some weird scenario, I would have assumed from the warmer parts of the USA.
So yeah, foremost on the nose, there is that really sweet orange citrus. There is lovely mineral smoke coming off. It's really quite beguiling, and I kind of like it. But on the palate, where it really counts, that's where the fruit comes.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the softer tropical fruit, the mango, the pawpaw, that's when it sort of arrives.
Huge hints of mango, grapefruit, papaya. A hint of sea salt too. There's just a briny prickle as well, which really sets us off. That's
There's heaps going on. And this is the only time in my entire contact with this whiskey where I think you get to really see the young age of the whiskey, because there's a boisterous fire in it. There's quite a catch.
It is vigorous and lively and has a real heat to it.
It's not so much that it tastes overly youthful, it's that it does have a real fire to it. It's got a kick for sure.
There's new flavors coming through, different spices, candied citrus peel, toasted nuts, toasted grains.
So with a bit of water, and I've been fairly moderate there, and what I'm now realising was a rather enormous pour to begin with. And that has gotten those juices flowing a bit more. We're getting more and more of that fruit as it dilutes somewhat.
Oh yeah, bananas, raisins on my nose now.
And that has kicked back that fire a little bit. I think it's better with a wee bit of water. But opinions may vary there.
It's bringing out some pastry and caramelized nuts. A little bit of chocolate.
Yeah, nuts for sure. Pastry, I'm not quite sure I get completely. It doesn't quite have the oiliness that I normally associate with pastry. It's a pretty quick and fluid whiskey, and in its own way, it's quite crisp. I think that fiery bite gives it kind of a snap on the palate, which makes it quite refreshing, despite how full on it is. I have not tried this one with ice. I think it could be a really decadent experience to have this nice and chilled down with that little bit of extra dilution as well. I think it could be a deeply tropical, fruity experience and could be pretty wild.
It'd make a mind-blowing old-fashioned as well.
It would. This is absolute old-fashioned fuel. It would be almost, you would have to be so careful on what you put in. We'll be talking about exactly one shake of Angostura bitters. You don't want to trample over these fruit characters, and then pretty light on the orange peel as well. Otherwise, go nuts. This would make an absolutely wicked old-fashioned. But I will leave that to you to figure out. So, in summary here, we've got Indian whiskey, which is its own thing, and I think more its own thing than the southern crowd of Paul John and Amrut, the old guard there, the ones that we are used to. It's extremely good Indian whiskey, where are they? Oh, they're on the tin. Never mind, I've already put it away. But it got the World Whiskey of the Year last year.
It's been racking up awards. It's an impressive CV now.
And it got the IWC 91. And that 91 is a much more of a red flag for quality to me than the World Whiskey Awards, though maybe I'm just being prejudicial towards them, but I sort of view them as a slightly lower tier awards just because they seem to be, there's a bit of a random element in that one. IWC, that's a more of a scientific, that's proper scrutiny happening in that room.
Wow.
So that one,
this is their first single malt whiskey as well. This is their premiere release, their flagship.
It is
achieving this level of quality in such a short span of time.
Yeah, because you would call this you'd call this the minimum age you can get away with, as good as it is.
Yeah.
I think it would start to fall off a cliff if it was any younger. But what it will get is older. Now that they have stock maturing, we have access to top dressing, other good stuff like that, and. So I'm expecting, more and more out of this, and I hope that they deliver. But scores for this one, not quite a 91, but it is a 90 for me. What have you got?
Well, there is so much going on here. Like so many other Indian expressions, that warm maturation just squeezes, it wrings out so much flavour and character out of his barrels in a very short amount of time. For some people, this will be a downside. I might think it's too busy, it's a bit of a cacophony, there's too much going on. For me, there is certainly a lot going on here, but it is harmonising well. It is just serving up plate after plate of new and interesting flavours. This is a 91 from me. Mm-hmm. It is a stunning premiere release from a very new
and I
production.
think rather excitingly, we'd have to go back in the archive, but I can fairly confidently say that makes it our new favourite Indian whiskey, which I think maybe, rather than saying that this is the world beater, it probably just means that we're probably manifestly out of date with the other distillers out there, because we have not caught up with anything from Umrot or Paul John for some time.
I'm sure I've had scores in the 90s from them. I personally have read
We'd have to check. But yeah, it's up there. It is a contender for sure.
I must say, for transparency, this bottle was a gift from Indri. They reached out to us, which we're very grateful for, to offer us this bottle, and it was sent down by them, and it has been a revelation. It's a stunning whiskey. No. It was given to us. This isn't a sponsored video, but it is a bottle that came to us direct from the source,
Indeed,
which we're very grateful.
It was, yeah. It makes it a hell of a lot easier when we don't have to march out there and pay for all the whiskey. So, other producers out there, if you're listening and you want us to have a shake at your whiskey, then send it on down. It will not guarantee you. It will not guarantee you a good score, but it will guarantee you your whiskey on the TV. All right. Thank you, Indri. This has been quite the revelation, and it's so good to catch back up with Indian Malt Whiskey Gang. I feel it's been too long since we've had a real deep dive into it, and
we just keep on innovating, and because it matures so fast, there's always something exciting and new, more whiskey that I can keep up with.
Yeah, for sure. All right, going along on this one, I can see a 12 on the screen, and that's just a waste of tape. Goodness, think of the binary data that's just falling into the ocean now. All right, Slanjo, we'll be right back.